You've sent a thoughtful message. You've given the space they asked for. You've shown up consistently, calmly, without pressure, and still nothing shifted. Because the avoidant silence was never a question waiting for your answer. It was a test you were never meant to pass, only to keep taking. And the most painful part? The more carefully you responded, the longer the test continued. At first, your silence doesn't scare them. In fact, it feels like relief. No pressure. No emotional conversations. No expectations. But silence changes meaning over time. And what they eventually realize is very different from what they expected. At first, the silence felt temporary. Something you could wait out. So you waited. They returned softer, warmer, just enough to make the wait feel worth it. Then the silence came back. Longer this time. You reached out again, carefully, without pressure, because you didn't want them to feel chased. They softened again, came back again, and the pattern became the relationship. Each time you reached out, you handed back something they had put down on purpose, and neither of you fully understood what that exchange was costing you. Not just emotionally, but in terms of who was actually holding the relationship together and who had quietly stopped trying. And the person holding it together every single time was you, which means you've been solving this the wrong way, not because you don't understand it, but because the way you're built makes one specific move feel almost impossible. And that one move is the only one that actually matters. Research from the University of California found that people with empathic attachment patterns spend significantly more cognitive and emotional energy monitoring their partner's emotional state than their own. In most areas of life, that's a gift. But inside a relationship with an avoidant, it means you feel their silence like a wound, and your first instinct is always to stop the bleeding. For them, before you've even checked whether you're bleeding too. I see this with my clients constantly. Self-aware, emotionally intelligent people who understand attachment theory, who can name the dynamic in real time, still reaching out, still breaking the silence first. Not because they don't know better, but because not reaching out feels in their body like doing something wrong, like abandoning someone, like becoming the very thing they never wanted to be. And so they send a message. The cycle resets. Understanding the pattern, it turns out, is not the same as being able to sit inside the discomfort of breaking it. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what happens phase by phase inside an avoidant psychology when you stop reaching out and don't go back. And why that moment, as quiet as it is the most powerful thing that can happen in this dynamic. The silence has a very specific function. When an avoidant goes quiet, they are regulating. Closeness exceeded what their nervous system could tolerate, and distance is the only tool they have to bring the anxiety back down. The silence is not about you. It never was. But here is what keeps the cycle running. They have learned that silence works, that if they wait long enough, you reach out, the anxiety settles. They return. What they have never had to learn because they have never been forced to is what happens when the silence is not answered. The person who stays in this dynamic longest has a very specific profile. Not just patient, someone who reads emotional shifts before they're spoken. Someone who notices the exact texture of the silence, how long it's been, what it might mean, whether it feels different this time. Someone wired, almost compulsively, to close the emotional gap between themselves and someone they love. You don't just notice the silence. You feel it as an emergency. And every instinct you have is designed to respond to emergencies. Other partners eventually break. They send the angry message, issue the ultimatum, create enough chaos that the relationship collapses, which only confirms the avoidant's belief that closeness leads to pain. Their nervous system files it away as proof. Nothing changes in them. But you never created that chaos. You sent the measured message, the calm check-in, that just wanted you to know I'm here. You held the emotional temperature of the relationship steady, with a self-control most people simply aren't capable of. And that steadiness, that remarkable, hard-earned calm meant the avoidant never once had to sit inside the real consequence of their silence. You always interrupted it before it could land. The same depth that made you reach out every time is the exact thing that gives you a capacity the avoidant has never encountered before, the ability to go completely, genuinely, quietly still. Not as a strategy, not to make them miss you, but because you have finally seen the exchange clearly enough to stop making it. And when someone with your emotional intelligence decides to stop, really stop, it moves through their psychology in 6 very specific phases. Phase 1, relief. The nervous system relaxes. Finally, things are calm. The withdrawal feels justified, validated even. But that relief has an expiration date, because relief built on someone's absence rather than your own peace doesn't hold for long. Phase 2, curiosity. The mental space once occupied by managing your closeness is now open, and into that space, a quiet question moves in. I wonder how they're doing. No action yet, just a thought they didn't expect to have. The person they withdrew from is now living inside the silence they created. Phase 3, the pattern break. This is where the shift begins. Avoidants depend on a very specific sequence they withdraw. You reach out, balance is restored. When the expected reach out doesn't come, something unfamiliar registers in their system. Why haven't they texted? It isn't missing you yet. It's something more unsettling, the loss of predictability. And for someone whose entire emotional architecture is built on controlling closeness, unpredictability is its own kind of emergency. Phase 4, ego disturbance. This phase is rarely talked about honestly, but it is real. It's not about missing you, yet it's about identity. Did they actually move on? When someone stops chasing, the entire emotional balance of the dynamic shifts. They are retreating from no one, and that specific aloneness, not the chosen solitude they cultivated, but the unchosen absence of someone who was always there, starts to register in a way they didn't anticipate. Phase 5, reflection. Without the usual cycle running, something happens that arguments and confrontations almost never produce real thinking without the defensive reflex that closeness triggers. The avoidant begins replaying moments from the relationship, not just the comfortable ones. Maybe I pushed them away more than I realized. Your absence gives them only themselves to sit with, and that is a confrontation they have spent years finding ways to avoid. Phase 6, the final realization. Eventually, the silence carries a message that cannot be softened or reinterpreted. Not anger, not manipulation, just absence. A clean, total absence. They're really gone. That is the moment their own pattern finally lands, not as something you did to them, but as the inevitable destination of what they kept doing to you. Some reach that realization, and it becomes a catalyst for genuine change. Others retreat further, because the dynamic they depended on no longer exists to retreat from. Either way, what was hidden becomes visible. Either way, you have your answer. Silence doesn't always change someone immediately, but it removes the pattern that kept the dynamic alive. And once that pattern disappears, the relationship reveals exactly what it truly was. The psychology of your silence is this. To an avoidant, everyone eventually explodes or disappears in chaos. You didn't either. You simply became unavailable quietly, completely for a dynamic that was only ever working in one direction. And in that stillness, you communicated something no message ever could, that you finally valued your own peace more than you feared their distance. That shift doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand to be noticed, but it is felt. And for the first time, in a dynamic built entirely on who pursues and who retreats, you became the one they couldn't read, the one who stopped, and the one they couldn't stop thinking about.